Hello and welcome to A New Day with Susan. I'm your host, Susan Yockey, and today, as I was saying in my previous episode, I got really vulnerable about some history in my life around the topic of child protective services, and I'm doing my first interview for this series of interviews with Denise Johnson, and we are specifically talking in the state of Montana. So Denise is a Montana native. She was born and raised in the Helena Valley on their family farm. She attended the Montana State University in Bozeman and graduated with a Bachelor of Science in Family Consumer Sciences. Her husband, Ron, and her met while employed at the Montana Power Company, where they both worked. And after MPC dissolved, they owned and operated a restaurant for 7 years. That's awesome. And Denise also worked for the Billings Clinic at the Lifeline Coordinator, or as the Lifeline Coordinator, for Head Start as the Marketing and Volunteer Coordinator, and for the Center for Children and Families as the Human Resources Manager. Currently, Denise is a child advocate and serves on the Montana Child Protection Alliance Board. She is also a business coach, author, and is running for the state legislature to represent House District 48 in Billings. Denise has written and published 2 books. Her most recent novel, For the Children, was written to give children in crisis a voice and to create conversations about the foster care crisis. Denise and Ron have 3 grown children and 4 grandchildren who are the light of their life. You can learn more about Denise Johnson and the book that she wrote, the children book, or For the Children book trailer at denisejohnson.com, or you can check her out on the YouTube channel, and I will include that link in our post along with her website so that you guys can connect with Denise as well. So, and then also, if you'd like to learn more about the Montana Child Protection Alliance, MCPA, I'll include a link, and there's also a Facebook page as well so that you can get involved. So first off, welcome, Denise, and thank you so much for being on my show.
Well, thank you for having me. It's a huge privilege. Thank you.
Thank you. So, well, you have a really great background. So before we kind of get into this conversation about the topic of child protective services and the foster care system in Montana, I love that you're a Montana native, and
Yes.
you have quite the history in Montana, like a restaurant. That's exciting.
Yeah. Everybody thinks they want to own one until they do, and then you go, oh, don't need to do that again.
Yeah, I bet it's, but you must have done really well for 7 years.
Yes, it was a great experience. We loved the people, and our kids were all very little at the time, though, so that was our biggest challenge. Was we didn't have any family in town, and we had little kids, and so there's times when you had to make a decision about staffing the store or finding childcare. It was crazy. So anyway, we enjoyed it, but we were really glad to get out of it too. So
nice.
yes.
And then a Head Start.
Yeah,
Head Start as the Marketing and Volunteer Coordinator. That sounds fun.
That was a great job. I love jobs that work around kids and elderly. I love the elderly as well. So it was a great position. I learned a lot. The one thing I've so enjoyed about everything I do is it's just such a great opportunity to learn. And maybe you wouldn't do some things different, or again, I should say, but you certainly get a chance to learn some new things. So I love that.
Awesome. Well, let's talk a little bit about your advocacy work that you currently do, and you're an author. So did you write the books before you got involved with the Montana Child Protection Alliance, or when did that come at play in your life?
Yeah, thanks for that question. I've always kind of considered myself a child advocate. My husband and I were foster parents decades ago, and we adopted two children out of the system. And those children, along with our biological son, are our blessings. We are so blessed to have them in our lives, and I truly believe they were always meant to be in our lives, but God just had to find a way to get them there because we weren't able to continue having children. So I've had a passion for foster care and children in crises, and I've always had the greatest respect for foster care workers too, those CPS workers who, are out there in the trenches helping kids in very awful situations, and how hard that must be. And so anyway, but our experience was so positive, and we just felt like, because of our experience, that if a child was in foster care, it was because their parents had done something to warrant their removal. But then about 4 years ago, friends of mine went through a really horrifying experience, and basically what happened is they had waited a long time to have children, and they had professional careers, and they were ready to buy their house. Everything was in order, and then their daughter had a very traumatic delivery, and it caused head trauma because her head was actually suctioned 4 times before they did a cesarean. And so their little one had failure to thrive, and then at about 2.5 months old, she was found unresponsive, and she was ambulanced to the hospital. And it's a rather long, complicated story, but to just make it short and sweet, not sweet so much, but they were accused of shaken baby, and their daughter was put in foster care. He ended up spending time in jail, and they both ended up losing their professional careers because their names were put on a child abuse registry. And it was kind of one of those moments for me that was just a turning point, because I couldn't imagine how this could happen to such a wonderful, loving family. And so I started doing research, and that research led me to recognize that their case was not an exception, but rather something that's going on across our nation, to the point that there is even a term for it, and it's called medical kidnapping. And so in this process of research, I just felt called to write the book for the children. And I wrote the book because of what my friends went through. It's not their story at all. It's completely fictional, but I wanted to just cause people to start having conversations about what the foster care crisis is in our country, and to basically get our head out of the sand and thinking, just like I had, that kids are in foster care because there's bad parents out there. And I just realized that we needed to have more real conversations about the fact that some of these children are not in foster care because of bad parenting, because of just poor circumstances, or a sequence of things that shouldn't have happened. So anyway, that's when I wrote the book. And at the same time I was doing all the research, I stumbled upon a group in Montana who were grandparents who were advocating for their grandchildren, and advocating for the rights of their grandchildren and the right to be in their life. And so I joined their group, and after I wrote the book, then they contacted me about forming a nonprofit and being on their board. And so the Montana Child Protection Alliance was formed out of those grassroots efforts. And then I was invited to be a part because of my book and my obvious passion for this subject. So that's kind of how it came to be. For where we're at to now.
Yeah. Wow. So it, not only coming, so you've got both perspectives.
Yes.
Perspective of being a foster parent, and then seeing what the process from the outside point of view. That's really amazing.
It really is. I have had the privilege and heartbreak of walking alongside of a number of biological parents in the course of the last year or so, and I have just never seen something quite so heart-wrenching for my husband and I. And I truly do. I appreciate you bringing up both sides, because I truly feel like that's where I am at. I have been given that perspective of a foster parent and an adoptive parent, and recognizing that fortunately my children were rescued from very horrific situations, and they were giving the safety of a home that loves
Yeah.
them, and they're my kids. But I've also seen situations where parents are just, they're borderline, and they just could use some help. And
Yeah.
instead of getting help, their kids get taken into foster care. And what's happens from there is just a very painful process of that family just sinking.
Mhm.
If they, and again, there are children who definitely need to be removed. My children were an example of that. So there's many times the system works properly, the children are rescued and they're put in an appropriate, safe place. But
Mhm.
there's times when it's just not working. And
Yeah.
what we're seeing is over time is the outcomes for our kids in foster care statistically are not that great. And like 40% of our homeless and prison populations are made up of foster kids,
Yeah.
former foster kids. And an interesting statistic, the state of Texas actually determines their prison population based on the number of kids that aged out the previous year. I mean, those are not good statistics. Those are
No.
not good outcomes. The thing that I think, our kids are going to be, they're 4 times more likely to commit suicide. They're more times more likely to experience PTSD. But I think the stat that scares me the most is the fact that 85% of children, the other statistic that's very alarming to me is that according to the Center for Missing and Exploited Children, 85% of children rescued from trafficking are foster children.
Oh,
And
wow.
that's horrifying. Isn't that
Yeah.
horrifying?
It is
It's,
horrifying.
yeah. So I think our goals for me personally and as an organization is that we just want to raise awareness of children's rights and to advocate for due process. And one of the things we're seeing is that due process isn't being, they're not, families are not getting due process. We've had examples where children are removed from a home without a court order, and they're also not given a hearing in an appropriate amount of time. They can go months without a hearing. And that, it's one thing if a criminal case gets delayed, because that's a static event that's happened, and now we're collecting data and proving, facts. But when a child's case, a family case gets delayed, that's so unfair to the children and family, because they're treated as if they've done something wrong before they've even had a chance to speak on their behalf. And
Yeah.
while that's all being delayed, these children are growing up without their family, without their connections, without a sense of security. And there's so much new research about what happens to children when they go through the trauma of being separated. I
Mhm.
remember even years ago when we were foster parents and we were going through the foster parenting training, we were told that a child would rather be in an abusive home. In many cases, they'd rather be in an abusive home where they know their family than to be placed in a stranger's home that maybe was much nicer than their home. And that's a heartbreaking thought, to think that
Yeah.
a child would want that.
Mhm.
And obviously, we don't want to leave children in an unsafe home,
Right.
but we just need to do a better job of making sure that we don't further traumatize children by removing them, when what we really could do is just come around that family and provide services or support. And again, I know there's a lot, it's not a simple answer, but we have enough evidence to show that what we're doing isn't working. Our
Yeah.
foster care numbers just continue to climb, and these statistics just continue to become more and more horrifying. That is not a good sign. That doesn't
No.
show that we're handling it. And I also recognize we have a drug issue, as do most of our neighboring states, and as does this entire country. But again, we have lots of evidence that shows that in many cases, that if we come around the family, again, we have evidence that if we come around a family, even a family that's dealing with drug issues or addiction issues, that the children tend to do better when they are allowed to stay in a safe environment where the parents are getting addiction services,
Mhm.
versus the child being removed, put in foster care, parents go into a separate treatment program, and then try to reunify that family. It's very difficult. It's very traumatic. And we end up hurting the children in so many cases like that. So
Yeah.
we just need to do a better job of coming around the family and keeping them intact whenever possible, and as long as the children can be safe.
Yeah.
And yeah, and that's kind of what I have observed as I've been walking along these side of these families is, um, it just takes somebody who cares a little bit about their family, who shows them kindness, who is more interested in the outcome of their family than necessarily the process. Part of our problem in our culture right now is that funding isn't available for helping the family until the children are removed and put in foster care.
Yeah.
And that, of course, creates this situation where we're monetizing children. And no one wants to admit that. No one wants to recognize that, but that's essentially what's happening.
Mm-hmm.
The good news is that in February, the Family First Prevention Services Act was passed, and that will begin to divert funds to in-home services, into addiction programs, things like that, for up to 12 months for a family. Um, the problem is that money isn't available until October 2019. So it's
Wow.
important. Yeah, I know we're a ways out.
That's a ways out.
It's a long ways out. But there are other communities who are already working with this idea through donations from nonprofits and businesses to try to work into something that's workable. And that's, I think, actually how this Family First Act came to be, is that there were communities who were trying a different approach and getting some better results. So that's how some of this came to be. And that's actually partly why I decided to throw my hat in the ring for legislature too, because I thought, this upcoming session is going to be vital that we create legislation that takes advantage of this new funding and this new way to help families. And so I don't have all the answers. I wish I did, but I'm on a steep learning curve, and I've certainly recognized the problems. And just know that we need to come up with a better system. The system is broken. It's overwhelmed. The social workers are overwhelmed. No one can do what they're being asked to do, and and stay in the game very long. So we're losing good social workers. We have inexperienced social workers who are making literally life and death decisions for a family, with really not the experience, or maybe even they might not even have children themselves to know what happens in families, and that we need grace, and that we need a place where we can learn to do it better if we're not doing it right. There is no such thing as a perfect parent.
That's for
So
sure.
and that shouldn't be the standard.
Right.
We need to keep our families together. I have I am so grateful for my children, and but I made a point of staying connected to their biological families, because I knew at some point that might be important to them, and it has proved to be very important to them. For example, my son ended up with a genetic issue that was hereditary, and so because we couldn't stay connected with his family, he was able to be contacted, and that was very important. So that's good for him, for his health. My daughter, I think it was more, sometimes it's just a girl thing or a woman thing to just know a little bit more about the medical history and things like that, because she has children, and so I am very grateful that we had the opportunity to stay connected. It wasn't an open relationship by any measure, but I had the information so that when they were ready to reach out, they could. And I see the value of that, because you might move a child from one home to another, but you cannot move their DNA.
That's
That will
right.
stay with them. And if a family is not thriving, they will continue to not thrive for generations if we don't step in and help that family right where they're at. So, yeah.
Well, and it also, you've really made a lot of great points, and especially with statistics, because people like to hear the statistics. An interesting thing, when I first started this conversation on my Facebook page, it actually, the conversation got stirred up on a post that I seen with this stuff going on with the immigration
Yes.
children being removed and stuff. And like all of a sudden you see this all over the internet, and me, I was just like, are you kidding? Like, hold on, we have like this happening in our own country.
Yes. Exactly.
So I somehow got into this conversation. Oh, because someone posted a picture of, oh my goodness, I don't even remember the guy's name, but it was an actor, and he's like, just because he doesn't have blonde hair and blue eyes. And I thought,
Wow.
first, they're making this race about race.
Mm-hmm.
It's about children and families, period.
That's right. That's right.
And I said, even white children are being removed from their homes. There might be a higher number based on demographics and, whatever. Right. But they shot. Their response to me was, "Oh yeah, right. Where is that happening?" And I'm like, in the entire United States.
Yes. Yes.
And they're like, "Well, where do you get your information?" And boy, I just started just plugging that information there, and finally they stopped.
Yes.
But nobody's educated on
right.
what is really happening. It's been so just covered up and part of the, just
right.
the flow of society that people just know, oh, that family must be bad.
Exactly.
They're yelling at them in the store or something.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and then they call social services. I mean, it's a range of things that people.
Right. Right. You're absolutely right.
It just
I've noticed that too.
Mind.
Yeah, I've noticed that as well. That people do not want to believe what I'm saying. I mean, it's like they just don't want to believe that this is happening in our country. And I agree with you totally. It's not about race. It's not about politics. It's about our children. And we should be raising just as loud of a voice about the children in our child welfare system as we are the children on the border. It's a huge issue. Even some of the statistics I'll share with you too, that I'm trying to find the report here real fast, but so much of what we're finding, like, for example, I saw this report in parentalrightsfoundation.org, and it said that in light of the United States Department of Health and Human Services 2017 revelation that roughly 83% of all child abuse investigations each year are neither indicated nor substantiated, one has to wonder just how many of these removals are really necessary in any population size.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
They just need some intervention and, like you said, services. And it's my understanding that, I did research when this program even began, and it goes way back.
Yes.
But before I knew about that history of it, it was my understanding that the program was created to help keep the families together, to provide the necessary services that they may need, drug rehabilitation or mental health services, or I've heard of children being removed because their electricity got turned off.
Yeah.
And then in the same breath have also heard of stories where there was a man who was homeless with his son under a bridge, and was told by this person was told by social services, well, as long as the child has a roof over their head and he's feeding him.
Yeah, I know. We see those extremes.
It's interesting.
It is. And that's what we see too, is those extremes. And as an organization, we are receiving calls from across the state by the hundreds of families who are feeling like they have been treated unfairly, that they've been alienated from their children or grandchildren, that they're willing to help. I mean, back, several generations ago, that's how our culture functioned. I mean, the grandparents lived with the parents, and if somebody had a health issue, well, the family stepped in around, and so we've become a different culture where children are scattered all over the country and whatever it might be. But I have a struggle thinking that the government is going to be the one that's going to fix this, because children, again, have a right to be in their family if they can be safe, and that might mean an aunt or an uncle or a grandparent,
Yeah.
and that should
Yeah.
be our priority, is to keep that family intact and
Yeah.
allow that family to come around and support and care for those kids. Yeah.
Yeah.
And at the same token, like you say, we sure don't want kids being left in terrible situations, and yet that is also happening,
Yes.
because this system is so plugged up and so bogged down with the mere magnitude of the number of children.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Pause. Yeah. So, well, I noticed that you mentioned that you're an author of 2 published books. One is for the children, and people can go see the trailer on your YouTube channel or by going to your website at denisejohnson.com. What is the second book?
Actually, the very first book I wrote was called Love to Give, and I wrote it for my children because I wanted them to have their story. My husband and I had a very unique, journey to become parents. And our very first child we adopted. And when he was a month old, his biological mom changed her mind and reclaimed him. And so I think that's also part of why I'm so passionate about children and the crises that so many families are in, because I know what it feels like to have to give up a child that I did not want to give up. And it totally changed our lives. It was by far one of the hardest things we've ever been through, and continues to be one of the most vulnerable things to my heart, because we love that little boy, and it was our first. So anyway, the first book is about our children, and the journey that we went through, the adoption, the first adoption that failed, a pregnancy that ended sadly. Also, we lost our second child, and so I wrote it for my kids so that they would know why they are so important and so special to us. But anyway, I published it, and a lot of people have read it and felt that it was helpful for people that were struggling with infertility or infant losses or adoption, and just wanted someone to hear somebody's stories that's been through the process. So it's out there as well. It's called Love to Give. Both of the books are available on Amazon. Because neither of them are top sellers or anything. You do have to put in Love to Give by Denise Johnson and For the Children by Denise Johnson, but they do come up. So yeah, I feel like God made me a story writer or storyteller, and so I love writing, and it fills me, and I love to do more of it when I'm maybe a little quieter pace in life, but not right now. But I do have my blogs and things on my Facebook page too. So I'll keep poking at it, and I would like to write. I've got another couple stories in my mind, so I need to get back to that someday.
Yeah, I love that. That's really great. I like how it seems to have come full circle for you, and now you're advocating for people who are experiencing the disruption, I'll call it, within their families that's caused. I don't want to say it's caused, because like you were saying, there are families that need intervention.
Yes.
And then there's families like the one that you shared in the beginning. I get goosebumps just thinking about that family and their child and what they went through. Because of I think of the long-term impact that kind of stuff has on the children, on the families.
Yes.
As far as the level of, because I am a transformation and mindset coach, my mind goes right to how the brain works and the impact that kind of traumatic experiences cause, whether it's a big one or a little one. And I have to say personally, I was sexually abused growing, off and on through my younger years. And then I also experienced my oldest son being removed from me by the state. And I have to say that the longer term effect of that and the feeling that I dealt with through all that was a lot more powerful to work through as far as the healing perspective than it
Mm-hmm.
was through the sexual abuse.
Interesting. And I would concur with that because, my very first story, although we lost two children within 6 months of each other under completely different circumstances, and the death of our daughter was devastating.
Mm.
The healing of losing a living child by force was by far the hardest thing to this day
Yeah,
to heal from. It's just it creates a trauma that it
yeah,
changes who you are from that day forth. And
that's right.
what scares was us, I guess not scary, but well, somewhat, but just to think about what that does to a 4-year-old.
Oh
Or,
goodness.
I was an
Yeah,
adult when this happened, and
yeah,
I had a very, very difficult time with that. But
yeah,
think about a 4-year-old or an 8-year-old and what it does to their ability to trust their family and think that I will be safe with these people when you couldn't protect me and I was taken away to another home and this must be my fault. And it's really a horrible thing for a child to put their head around, let alone, I
yeah,
mean, for an adult to put their head around, let alone a child.
right. Yeah, it's the impact of the emotional and the belief systems that
Yes.
they grow up with are huge. I mean, like you said, 85% of children who were in foster care end up in prison. I mean, they're literally building prisons based
Right.
on numbers of
Yes.
these children. So they're
Yes.
creating a future that hasn't even happened yet.
Exactly. And just a correction on that stat, 40% of those in prison were former foster kids.
40%.
Or 40, yes.
Thank you for that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And it's
Wow.
85% that they rescue from trafficking are foster kids.
Oh my, yeah, that's
Yeah.
horrible.
Yeah. So, yeah, you're absolutely right. It is creating societal costs to us ongoing. I mean, not only is it creating trauma to children and trauma to the families, and quite frankly, generational trauma. I mean,
Yeah.
there is research that actually shows that this trauma changes their DNA. So if you change the
Wow.
DNA of a child, then that means their children have an altered DNA, and it's something that we need to stop and address before we induce more trauma.
Yeah.
But yeah, it is, and the societal costs are huge. Like
Yeah.
you say, more prisons, more homeless shelters, more mental health, more mental illness and mental health issues. And I mean, it doesn't. When people look at how many kids are in foster care, sometimes there's this tendency to go, well, it doesn't affect me.
Mhm.
That's somebody else's family, and that would never happen to me. But it does affect us because
Yeah.
we're paying for this, whether we pay it for it as you know funding for foster kids or more prisons. We're all paying for it. The cost to our society is huge, and it's
Yeah.
ongoing. And the fact that, again, that foster care numbers are on such a rapid increase, it says that we're not doing it right. We're just not doing it right.
Yeah. Well, on that note, what are your thoughts on and where the organization is going as far as because it's about empower and
Yes.
well, let me say in educating our public on what's really happening,
Yes.
and it's also about empowering the people. Oh, I get goosebumps. It's about empowering, excuse me, empowering the family to know that there's justice, to know that they have people by their side holding their hands. When we talk about it takes a community, a village to raise children, when does the village step in?
Yes. Yeah. Great question. Yeah.
And so, we need more people to really just step back, get this information and the knowledge of what's really happening and be advocates for the families, not like step in and take over, but to empower them to
Exactly.
understand and navigate this crazy system. I've done advocacy for cases, and I know that the process is painful.
Yes.
And if you have no idea what you're going through, you're blindsided. You are going in completely blind. So, and I'm so excited to see that. First off, you guys, there's an organization out here, and I'm sure is under volunteered for, maybe, and
Yes.
and we need more attorneys who would be willing to come in and help as well. And I know what I got excited about was how much more I am seeing this in the media versus when I did advocacy on this topic. Oh my gosh, like back in 2002. I hardly seen anything about it.
Right.
It was, I mean, just when internet was still kind of,
Mm-hmm.
so it's amazing to see how many people are getting to share their experience of
Right.
what's been disempowering for them, and to share the statistics and to share these actual real cases that are taking place. So with that, what are some solutions that you guys are working towards in the legislation
Well,
as an
that,
organization, and how
yes.
can people get involved?
Okay, perfect. Well, one thing that we're doing is that we're holding a statewide rally in Helena on August 23rd. That's a Thursday, from 10 to 1:30, and we really want to encourage people to just come and um, just learn. The whole point of the rally is to be educational. It is to be positive. We don't want to get into, you know, hateful stuff, because the bottom line is we all need to work together to solve this. That means the department, that means volunteers, that means the social workers, that means Montana Child Protection Alliance. Whoever cares about kids, we all need to get on the same side and go, yeah, this is not what we want for our kids, so what can we do to work together?
Yeah,
So that's the main objective of our rally, is to raise awareness, educate, and start working together and identifying who wants to be a part of solutions. um,
yes,
so, and the other thing that we're doing with our organization is that we are advocating for the families, because you nailed it. When a family loses their children, you might as well have just taken their oxygen away from them and
yep,
then expect that they're going to function properly or normally, and it just isn't possible, because it's very much like a David and Goliath situation where, whether the removal was valid or not, they're in a completely new arena that they've never been in before. Oftentimes they will get appointed a court-appointed attorney, but they might not actually meet their attorney until their very first hearing, which can be days or weeks out. Um, so they walk into a system that is well-oiled, well functioning, in the sense that they know what goes next, and the parent doesn't.
yeah,
So you're absolutely right. We need more people to come alongside families. We need more attorneys who can just kind of help us wade through. Um, that is one thing that we would really like to see legislatively, and it's very much in the early stages, is to come up with a better plan for advocacy for the families. Our court, not only is our CPS workers overburdened, but so is our court system. So it's not just one system that's
yeah,
falling apart because of the influx of children. So you again, you end up with a court-appointed attorney who may not even know a lot about family law, whose expertise is more in criminal law, and so everybody's already at a disadvantage,
yeah,
because in all reality, criminals have more rights than parents do right now in the legal system. So we need to change that. There's been a system of just kind of doing it the way we've been doing it for
yeah,
years. So why change? Well, we've got to. If we're going to stop this influx and this rise of foster care numbers, we have got to come up with some better answers. So, and I think that parent
right,
representation is a big part of it, and I think parent advocacy is a big part of it. In my personal working with several families, um, I truly have seen that advocating for these parents has made the difference of them being able to get their kids back, of them being heard. I've sat in courtrooms and seen the bias and the unfairness, and I don't, again, even if if a parent did something to deserve getting their child removed, that parent is still a person, is still a human being, and they still have value, and their family has value. And we want to help them reclaim their family if that's their goal. I mean, some of them that isn't. It's so bad that that they don't deserve children, and we don't want them ever to have children. But for those who are working hard and are doing everything the department is asking them to do to get their children back, then they deserve to get their children back much quicker than someone who's not making any effort at all. And it's for the benefit of the children. This is all, we've all got to put our focus on what's best for the kids, not on politics, not on the budget, not on the finances, not on monetizing anyone. It's got to be about what is best for our kids, and that means conversations with all the players who care about that child.
That's right.
So as an organization, that's really a big thing. And I also just would say personally that there are a lot of people out there who just say, I could never be a foster parent, or I could never adopt children, or I could never whatever. But we can all do more about stepping forward and saying, you know what, I could offer a tank of gas to a mom who needs money to get to and from visits, or I could help, just do respite care for this parent. And there's wonderful nonprofits across our state who are serving children. Find out who they are in your community and decide, I want to mentor a child. I want to come alongside of a single mom. There's a place for everyone. And all too often we get lost in our own lives and think, well, we just don't want our lives ruffled over someone else's chaos. But if we're going to solve this, we all need to step up and find a place to help others.
That's right. All right. And then, I really love it. And I will post on the, when we post this, we'll have the link, or not the link, but the information to the upcoming rally. And I love what you said about, this is not about coming together to point fingers, blame. This is about sitting down at the table and let's all have a conversation to search for the resolution. What I do know from the kind of training and development that I have is that organizations, businesses, it doesn't matter who you are, if you're an individual person or in a family, in a relationship, you can't keep recreating a system from something that's not been working from the past.
Exactly.
You have to get to nothing about what's been happening and looking at all the pros and the cons, the what's working, what's not working. And you can't do that without the parents who have been through this system.
That's right.
And I know this from the work that I've done at working on welfare reform. And for 10 years, it took us forever, it seemed like, to just educate our public on welfare reform and to erase the stigma against what it means to be on welfare. And
yes.
what it feels like to stand in line whipping out coupons from a food stamp book and everyone staring at you. There's just,
Yes, exactly.
This whole thing about it. So I'm excited about the rally. I definitely will be there to cover it, but also to to participate. As well.
Oh, good. Good.
All right. You mentioned before our interview that you've probably spend a good up to 40 hours a week doing advocacy. What is your experience like with that, doing the advocacy? For me, when I did it back then, I wasn't as knowledgeable as far as mindset and communication skills and stuff like that. So I also was the kind of person who would really own other people's feelings and I wanted to fix it for them.
Yep.
How do you, because I had people I can't believe you're helping this girl and she really deserved taking her kids, but my heart really wasn't, I loved her. She was an amazing woman. I saw a side of her that she didn't see herself of herself. However, she had issues, yes.
Yeah.
But it was about the injustice of the process.
Mm-hmm.
how do you advocate for people who just, I don't know, how do you separate yourself? Do you know what I'm talking
Yeah.
about? Like,
Yeah.
separate yourself from
Yeah.
that.
And I do think that that's a very good point, because many of us who have a passion for advocacy do. We just put our whole heart out there, and we just want to,
Mhm.
love on these people. And you do have to have some boundaries. You have to protect your own life and your own families. Um, but for me, it's been, well, for our organization, it's just been a huge variety. Some people, for example, might just come in or contact us and say, I need an attorney in this town. So, we have a list of people who um, we've heard great things about. And so, we have some people we can refer to, or a good therapist. Um, some people just, I had one little gal who, um, she she just was, because CPS had taken her children, she was resistant to everything they said. So I
Um,
I just came alongside, and so one day she was sharing with me what CPS had told her to do, and she just was kind of like, all friction, and I'm not going to do that. And so I just let her vent, and then I just said, well, um, do you think that would help you or help your child if you were to do that? And then she kind of took a breath and she said, yeah, I think you're right. It probably would. But she couldn't hear it from CPS because they
right.
were
The
the
bad
enemy.
guys,
Yeah.
right.
But
Yeah.
because I came in and said, hey, I want to help you, um, she was able to step back and look at it a little differently, and then be more open to embracing a change. So I think that that's a really important role that we can play for people that are in the system. Um, there's some days that all I've done is gone to court with someone and held their hand when their child was taken. Their rights were removed, permanently removed, and I cried. I just cried with her, because she just needed to know somebody was there for her that day. And so, I mean, it's a real wide variety, and it is really hard to sometimes emotionally separate ourselves. But
Yeah.
I'm not sure I really want to anyway, completely, because I really do want these people to know that I care
Yeah,
about them and their
that's
families,
right.
and that, when we treat people with kindness, regardless of what their end story comes out to be, they will learn to treat themselves better, and they
That's
will
right.
treat other people better, because they've learned that they're worth it. They're worth
I love
their
that.
family's worth it.
That's
So
right.
yeah,
I
it's
think
it's a
you're
great
exactly
question.
right. And the key word that you used was setting your own emotional boundaries.
Yes.
Um, and of course, now where I'm at today, I could totally be involved. So recently, what stirred this whole thing back up for me was someone I know, social services was called, and my immediate, it was like gunfire, big
Yeah.
mama bear, like I gotta protect them and they're the bad guys. And but as a coach who's transformed,
I love it.
yeah, it didn't take me long. I just was aware of my feelings, and I had to step back and say, wow, where's that coming from? And I still had some healing of my own to do, which
Sure.
I share in the episode. But to be strong for that other person, I agree. You've got to have boundaries. Um, but I love what you just said, because that's that's why we're here on this planet, right?
That's
It's
right.
love
That's
each
right.
other. Oh,
Yep. That's exactly right.
love and joy and lifting each other up and empowering one another.
Right.
That's what it's
Right.
about.
Right. And
Yeah,
focusing on strengths.
right.
All of us have strengths and all of us have
Yep.
weaknesses. But instead of beating people down because of their weaknesses,
Yeah.
let's find the things they're doing right, and let's build off of that. And we have on our board, we have some remarkable people with a lot of variety of different strengths. And one of them, Matt, he has done amazing work with Circle of Security, and so I count on him a lot when I run into circumstances, because I honestly am learning as I'm going. I
Mhm.
don't I don't have this advocacy figured out, but I do understand that when people are in crises, because I've been there before, different crises, um, just knowing that someone else is there with you
Yeah.
can make all the difference. about coming through it whole and healthy versus crashing and burning.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, Denise, is there anything else that you would like the listeners to hear before we end today's show?
I think the big thing would just be come and join us at the rally on August 23rd. Let's be a voice for kids in Montana. Let's make sure that we're coming with the right mindset of education and learning and collaborating so that we can come up with some solutions for our kids. Our kids deserve better. They deserve better outcomes. And we're smart enough, we care enough that we can come up with some better solutions for them. So come
Amen.
join us at the rally on August 23rd and at the Capitol steps from 10 to 1:30 on the 23rd, Thursday.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Denise, for being on my show, and you've been amazing. I look so forward to hearing what people would like to share. So I'm inviting the listeners to definitely share your stories. I truly believe that when we talk about the things that happened to us, you don't want to continue to live in what happened, but you want to empower yourself by sharing your story because someone else might hear something in that story that could help them. So Denise, thank you for doing what you're doing, for contributing to the world of families and our communities and being together and staying connected. I love that you're an advocate for that. So thank you.
Well, thank you for having me, and thank you for helping to speak for children too with your program. I really appreciate it. So look forward to meeting you
You too.
in person.
See
Okay.
you.
All right.
All
Sounds
right.
good.
Bye.
Thank you. Goodbye.